Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Game Dev London podcast. So, my name is Adam. You can refer to me as he, him. And with me today on this pink evening, apparently, I have our wonderful co-host, Vix. Vix, hi, how are you? How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm okay. I'm also in a weirdly pink room.
I mean, so I did this for the last episode because I was like, I probably should have something going on, then it's just blank, blank, blank. And it does feel very streamery. I feel like I should be on Twitch right now, and it's got that kind of energy. I don't have the leaves, what they're called. Bio leaves? The leaf shaped lights you
Oh,
get on
yeah, yeah,
walls.
yeah.
Don't have
I
those.
quite like those though. They look
They're so
funky.
expensive. I do want
They
them,
are.
but they're very cool.
Yeah, I've
But
just got £20 like Amazon ring light and you know,
yeah,
just spotlights.
I also have mine's like a 10, 20 quid Amazon ring light. So if you feel like we have a really professional setup here, it's secret Amazon purchases. Shh, it's okay.
Oh
It's
god, yeah.
fine. Or there are other retailers are also available, but that's where we got ours. Um, but yeah, so I have we will come together today to have a chat about something really important to games and also to VR because we're both VR developers, so we're going to dive into a bit of that as well. We're going to chat about onboarding. We're going to talk about onboarding in video games as standard, onboarding in VR games specifically, why they're different, why that difference matters, how they can work together to improve onboarding across the board. Before we sort of dive headfirst into that, I do want to talk about what is onboarding. So just to give a quick example to people who are out there. So onboarding is basically the process of when you start something, and it's not just games, this exists in the real world. So when you start a new job, when you start... you buy a piece of equipment, when you install a microwave or whatever it might be. Onboarding is the process of getting you from not knowing anything about it, not understanding it, not knowing what it is, to being on board with how that thing works. So if it was a microwave, you read the instruction manual, you get an idea of what it is. Normally onboarding is a bit more involved. It normally involves you being taken through steps either by someone or in some kind of way that they step you through the moments of what's involved. But it's the idea of getting you on board with the ideas, the processes, the setup, the systems, whatever is involved in kind of doing that kind of thing. So this happens in games and in VR. Very generally, it's level one, something that brings you into the game. Sometimes it might introduce the story. Sometimes it just introduces the mechanics. Sometimes it's very obvious. Sometimes it's not. It's not very obvious at all, but it's still there. And sometimes it's just missing. And sometimes it's terrible. And we're going to talk about all of that today. But to start off with, I think it probably makes sense. Let's start with some of our favorite examples of onboarding in games. So Vix, thinking back on those many years of wonderful and terrible games in equal measure, have you got any examples of onboarding that you particularly enjoyed or you thought worked particularly well?
Well, I was thinking about it and I think for one, Skyrim does it really well. And Skyrim's a game that, everyone's played about 5 times on about 20 different consoles. I've even played it on my Alexa, which was an interesting experience because it's just a text-based adventure and it's wonderful. Frankly, really, really nice. But the way that Skyrim onboards you is just giving you the text prompts, but not giving them to you until you actively need them. So it's not overloading you with information. It's just putting you in a situation and then telling you what to do in that situation. And I quite enjoy when games do that versus just, giving you everything at once.
Mm-hmm. Bethesda games in particular they go for this kind of approach of you feel like the game has started, but actually the game hasn't started until about 5 minutes in, or 5 to 1 hour in, depending on which game you're playing. Where they've suddenly set up everything that you need to know to then play the game. Skyrim it's got a particularly good sort of introduction, like these are the factions, here's the story, this is a dragon, there you go, enjoy,
Yeah.
and then just lets you loose. Whereas Fallout 3 and Fallout 4 both kind of set you up in this kind of, okay, this is the world within which you find yourself. You're introduced to moving and existing and shooting and being and all this kind of stuff. Particularly Fallout 3, where you start the game as basically a baby.
Literally a baby.
Literally a baby.
The first moments of the game, you are born into the world.
And you go through the stages as you're growing up in that you're introduced to all the mechanics of the game through the child of the child. So like shooting is shooting a BB gun and some bottle caps. Your birthday, you're introduced to the stats system and all those kind of things. So by the time
Yeah.
you leave the vault, it's a literal physical representation of onboarding you into the world. You are ready to go in and do whatever and understand all the mechanics. So go on.
I think it's quite interesting because that's something that Bethesda do in pretty much every game that they
Mm.
develop, is they have this setup stage where you basically are locked into a linear path, and that's their onboarding for you. Is you Oblivion, for example, you start off in prison and then you go through the tunnels to escape from the prison. All the story stuff happens, and you're suddenly out into the world and you can do whatever you want.
And it's
Um,
it's interesting because I've seen games do. In fact, one game comes to mind on that because it started the other way, where it just went, "Here you go, enjoy." It had a couple of things, which was Rocket League, which started very
mm,
much kind of like you can play casual matches, or you can play kind of. They had some training modes where they sort of introduced, try and block this, try and move, but at no point did they originally introduce the mechanics of the game. So you just kind of go in, you press all the buttons, go read the control scheme. Very kind of lacking in onboarding it, and only now, sort of certainly since they went free to play, maybe just before that, did they introduce a linear onboarding setup where you're presented when you first start the game on a new device. It sort of presents this kind of as though you're in a match, but everything is hotkeyed. So it's like, now
yeah,
jump, now press this, which is great for people who haven't played the game, because then you go, you just get that little bit of understanding. So when you start your first match, you're not going in completely blind. You do have an understanding of what's happening. But it also, it locks every time you start on a new console. It locks you in. So if you have an
yeah,
obscene number of hours in Rocket League, like I do, every time I start a new device, like if I'm like, oh, I don't want to try on the Switch, or oh, I'm at someone's house and they haven't got it, so I'll play it on that. I have to play 5 minutes of linear onboarding, and that's an interesting part of it. Is that sometimes there's a sense of they have to teach you the rules in all these kind of games. You have to learn what you're doing, but a lot of onboarding can be very, very linear in that sense, and it doesn't gauge. Do you get it? Have you understood it? They force you down a
mm,
path of you. We assume you know zero, and we'll teach you everything. Which means that if you do understand what you're doing, that could be quite harsh.
yeah. It's sort of where linear and like intuitive gameplay, I should say, differs from, say, tutorials. So intuitive gameplay is like, your Oblivion, your Fallout. That's sort of intuitive. Okay, now I know that I need to do this because, like, there's a bear coming at me. I should probably kill it. Versus something that may need to be guided, like Rocket League, where if you're a new player, you're going to sit down at your PC and go, "Oh, I have no idea what I'm doing." And to be fair, I still have no idea what I'm doing, and I've got a decent amount of hours in Rocket League. Can't fly, but
Yeah.
there's no tutorial for that.
Well, and I mean, this is the thing about the difference between sort of going through something that is, it's just teaching you the basics, teaching you the rules and that kind of things, to something
Mm,
where you have to fundamentally understand the mechanics of the game to improve. Like, for
yeah,
example, another good example of that is Mario Odyssey, where it will, at every stage where you have to learn something new, a kind of mechanic, whether it's a jump or a dive or whatever, present you with the perfect scenario where you have to have done it to move forward. Nintendo being this kind of those masters of onboarding as well as game design in general. And but what Odyssey doesn't do is it doesn't teach you how you can combine those different move sets to then do amazing things. So
mm,
the big trick on Odyssey, kind of spoilers, is that the more you can utilize different mechanics together, so you can do a jump, a dive, a hat throw, a dive onto the hat, a bounce off, the further and further you can get distance with your movement and your jumps, and get moons that are quite hard to reach or get to out of reach places. But the game doesn't teach you that. It doesn't teach you about combining those moves. That's the game. That's what you have to go away and learn and figure out. And the same with Breath of the Wild. You're taught the mechanics. You're not taught the synergies and the combination. That's the exploration phase. That's for you to go and learn and figure out and become better at the game of doing it. Same with Rocket League. Whereas, and another game that does that, but and again is very hardcore anyway, is Splitgate. Obviously, super successful at the minute. Most people understand Halo. Most people understand Portal, but it still takes you very, very, very linear. Walk from A to B. Now walk from A to B, but jump over the gaps. Now walk from A to B and shoot a portal at the end of it. Now walk through this portal and And it's very linear, but because the game is very dependent on you need to understand these basics, it's only about 5 minutes, and it does go, here are the basics, here you go, you've got it, great, move on. And that is okay, although it's not intuitive. It's not, we'd all love to have some sort of crazy like introductory shorthand, like, wow, introduced to the law, all this kind of thing, Skyrim style. But it doesn't happen all the time. And what could be worse than that is onboarding that can set you down the wrong path. So have you had any examples of where you've done bad onboarding and really been put in a position where you're like, ooh, I didn't enjoy this?